Welcome back, everybody, from a very short lunch break. Although the Safety Cluster General Assembly was meant as a kind of working lunch. So, 2:45 o'clock, we would like to now go into the topic of NanoRisk governance. I'm very happy to introduce as first speaker presenter Marie-Valentin Florin from Switzerland. We're presenting the first presentation on features of NanoRisk governance frameworks in development, which are currently actually under development, from her perspective, being responsible for developing the NRGC, so the council concept. What are the current concepts for the council of the NanoRisk governance frameworks? So please, Marie-Valentin, carry on. I also uploaded your survey.
Yeah.
You have already guided yourself to the presentation.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Martin, for the introduction. So good afternoon, everyone. My presentation is indeed one of several presentations about work from NMBP 13 projects that are working together to produce a few things, including a multidisciplinary risk governance framework, and you're going to have Arto Säämänen later today, and as well as a multi-stakeholder council for the governance of risks related to engineered nanomaterials. And this is what I'm going to talk about. Sorry, I went too quickly. The idea is that a risk governance council will be developed and established in order to facilitate collaboration and alignment between disciplines and stakeholders, between important nano projects, and between scientists, regulators, and policymakers. So it's a kind of everybody comes together. But before entering into the details, many of which will actually be provided by Rob Aitken after me, I would like to suggest that you sort of try to think yourself about what a new organization would do next to the many other institutions and organizations that currently work to assess, regulate, and generally manage safety and risk, with a view to produce nanomaterials in products and systems now and in the future. There's already a lot of institutions, ECHA, EFSA, EMA, initiatives from the OECD, NER, Malta initiatives, etc. And what could a new organization do? So in NanoRigo, we've thought about it, and we've come with that slide that you have in front of you, which it's actually produced by multiple interactions with stakeholders. And we thought that the important themes for such a new organization could be to work to balance future innovation and precaution towards the future. So the starting point is that the field of engineering nanomaterials is changing. Convergence with other technology is adding complexity, scientific uncertainty, and social ambiguity. And a new paradigm is needed to deal with risks from emerging technology. Our second thinking is that we need to bring together disciplines and stakeholders to address current but also future challenges in a fully collaborative manner. And third, that we need to improve environmental and human long-term sustainability, and there are concerns about today, of course, but also tomorrow in the long-term future. So we have coined these two terms, innovation and precaution and responsibility. At least we use these two terms, meaning innovation. Under innovation, the new organization should support innovation in nanotechnology and the new development of new advanced innovative materials. And with regards to precaution and responsibility, the new organization should advance research, production, use, and recycling of safe, responsible, and sustainable nano-enabling techniques, applications, and products, again, today and in the future, and including so-called responsible research and innovation, namely RRI, as it's called in European Union. we also think that after these main themes that I had just briefly presented, we've looked at which stakeholders should be part of that. And by stakeholder, I mean any organization that either causes a risk or manages a risk or is being affected by the risk positively or negatively, or could be affected. And we have come to this idea, at least in NanoRigo, that that such a new organization should be fully able to include and to engage stakeholders. And this is at the core of our proposal for the future so-called council. What you see on the graph now is kind of 5 pillars: science and academia, industry, regulation, end users and citizens, and other stakeholders. And each of them come with their respective needs, constraints, opportunities, expected benefits. I mean, the stakeholders have all something to contribute, which is different, and the idea is to put all this together. So we have also collected from interactions with stakeholders that there is a series of needs, as we call it, that stakeholders have, and we need to look at where are the needs as expressed by these stakeholders. Then we look at what existing organizations are doing, and in terms of their mandate, their activities, or they could do, and then this identifies, or this leaves room for what we call gaps, meaning where the council could do something. This means that the new institution, this new council, should not overlap, should not compete, should complement what others are doing in function to the expectations and needs expressed by stakeholders. So also on the side of needs, we have, so here is a list of 7 so-called needs that we have understood from working with, speaking with, hearing, listening to stakeholders. And we've heard these needs: the need to help share and translate scientific data, information, and methods; the need to support regulatory harmonization where possible, and to help also implementation of the regulation, which is particularly true for small and medium enterprises. The need to understand, reduce, and learn how to cope with uncertainty, that is the pervasive uncertainty that remains with the science, and also the ambiguity, meaning the different interpretations that result from the same scientific information sometimes, with the goal to define what is an acceptable level of risk, because this acceptable level of risk varies across stakeholder groups. The fourth is the need to help stakeholders make the best use of concepts such as safety by design or life cycle assessment, or also development of a circular economy. Number 5 is the need to focus on emerging risks. So not so much what we know already as a risk, but what may come tomorrow as a possible risk. And therefore to do early warnings, to identify signals, indicators that a new risk is emerging, but also foresight, that is long-term view about what could come next, narratives of possible futures. Number 6 is work for the long-term sustainability of engineered nanomaterials and nano-based systems, with this focus on human and environmental sustainability more than or in addition to safety. And finally, work to implement responsible research and innovation. Not just think about it, but implement it in the practice. So this is actually all for my short presentation, but since Martin asked me to use the kind of survey function, no, I'm not completely done. If we could go back to the yes, okay. I would like to ask I have one question to ask you, and I had a slide to present that before the survey is put actually on screen, but this is okay. So the idea now is that I would like to ask you, what would a new organization do? What should it do or not do? And to this end, you don't need to know much more about what we have in mind, but To this end, I'd like you to think about the following statements, and for each statement, you think, is it correct or is it not correct? If you think it is correct, then you tick it. So it's multiple answer, If you think it is correct, you click it, you click on it. If it's wrong, you don't do anything. So the first statement is about stakeholders like NGOs. Are they already well included in the assessment and the management of safety risks? If you think this is correct, please tick this statement. If you think no, stakeholders, we don't have them enough, we don't know how to involve them enough, then you don't click on it. You just click if it is right in your view. The second question will be, industry should and could share more data with scientists, regulators, and NGOs, and we need a neutral place where this can be done. So we need more. If you think it is right, click on that item. The third question will be, the third statement will be, there is enough attention paid today to potential long-term risks that may manifest later. So if you think this is correct, please tick this statement. If you think it is not correct, don't tick it. The fourth statement will be, emerging risks are well identified and assessed by existing institutions, meaning we don't need more. If you think this is correct, please tick this statement. Otherwise, just don't do anything. Number 5 will be, we know enough today about how to develop products that are safe by design. So we know enough today to develop products that are safe by design. Please tick this statement if you think it is correct. Number 6 will be, we know enough about how to do full life cycle assessment or analysis. Tick if it is correct. Don't tick if it is not correct. And number 7 we need a place, such an organization, where we or I could learn, experiment, and share findings about these matters. If you think it is correct, please click. Otherwise, don't do anything. And finally, I know what RRI, Responsible Research and Innovation, means in the practice. If you think it is correct, please tick. Otherwise, don't tick. Martin, do we need to give a bit more time so that participants complete the survey, or can we go to the results now? What do you think? Ready? I see it ready.
So we do have already 55 out of 170 people that have voted, which is already over 1/3 of the audience.
And because we don't have much time, maybe we can just have a look at the results and
I put it on display for you.
Yeah, okay, excellent. Yeah. Because I don't want to take too much time, and I know that Rob Aitken would probably go back on these matters, and maybe we can go back to survey results after Rob's presentation if there is time.
Okay. Good. Then I would like to thank you very much, Marie-Valentin, and ask Rob to start with his presentation, and we can come back to the results later on anyway.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marie-Valentin. Thank you, Martin. So this really follows on directly from Marie-Valentin's presentation. And I think the important thing really to emphasize is that this is a combined approach by the 3 projects. So 3 projects were funded, each had the task of designing a council, and clearly we took the view encouraged by the Commission not to design 3 councils, but rather to design 1 council. So Martin, I've kind of lost the slide here now. Has something happened? No. Okay. All right, we have that back. Okay. So our process for the designing of the council, well, Marie-Valentin talked about some of the needs and the gaps, and clearly in this kind of first part of the projects have been running for almost, well, over 18 months now. And in the first period, I think I would kind of reflect that there's been essentially a collection of inputs leading towards some ideas of how a council could be designed and could be implemented. And these are some of the kind of main steps there. One of the important thing is what we wanted to do is create a council that had a firm basis of argument behind it, a council that could be defended. Because there, as Marie-Valentin said, there are many players already out there. There is a need to show additional value that we do, but there's also a need to take account of what the existing scenario is. What we've really done here is we've worked through a very structured set of arguments to get to this point. And the point that we are at is that we have developed at this point what we're calling a scenario framework, which is really 4 possible scenarios, 4 possible ways that we could build the council. I'll talk about that a little bit in a second. The idea really is to have, if you like, a design of the council, a blueprint of the council based on one preferred scenario by March 2021. So we have very much been on the basis of collecting input, but at the same time trying to process that input into design opportunities and design possibilities. What we've done here is on this here is, before I talk about the scenario framework, what are the potential things the council could do? And this has been based on essentially the needs analysis plus various other inputs from stakeholders. And it's summarized in this diagram here. It really talks about 6 main activities, 6 main services, we call them here on this slide, around mapping of the existing landscape, about analysis of that landscape, about stimulating dialogue between players in that landscape, between participants, about organizing the training activities to bring people together and bring people up to speed on the same issues, about forming recommendations, which is really about engaging with stakeholders and others to form joint positions on risk issues, or even advocating positions in some places. And then plans, so essentially campaigns, developing activities and supporting others, supporting stakeholders to develop activities in there. So there's quite a bit of detail there and not enough time really to go into them. But I think what I wanted to share with you is the kind of major thrusts of it. These we think are the main things that the council should be doing. And that is based on both the input that we've collected from stakeholders and from others through a whole range of activities, and then analysis of that. And in thinking about these plans, these potential services, as we call them, there are different ways that you could organize the council to deliver these. And indeed, depending on how you do organize the council, would tend to prioritize some of these activities over other ones. And so we've taken this forward into what we call the scenarios of the council. And here, what I'm going to talk about now then is 4 possible ways that we could build the council. And we started from an analysis, a kind of decision analysis using 2 axes. And the axes that we chose, the horizontal axis, was to what extent is the council, or should the council be a facilitating organization? To the other side of the axis is to what extent the council should be a recommending organization. And then the vertical axis stretches from to what extent it should be governmental, and at the other side, to what extent it should be completely independent of government activity. And using this kind of decision axis, we created 4 scenarios, 4 possible scenarios, which are named there. Scenario 1, the Intergovernmental Panel on Nanomaterials. Scenario 2, the Scientific Committee on Nanomaterials. Scenario 3, Centre on Risks of Nanomaterials. And 4, the Round Table of Nanomaterials. And of course, behind this, there is a great deal of detail, some of which I can share with you here just now. And this really, and I apologize, it looks to me that this is not coming out very clearly. If you get very close to your screens, you may be able to read this. But this really maps out these 4 possible scenarios. So on the top left-hand side, the Intergovernmental Panel that I talked about. This is an intergovernmental organization by its name. Its target audience is focused on European policymakers and regulators. The members of it are essentially experts working directly for the panel with funding from the EC and European governments. The main activities would include a mapping on information on selected risk issues, analysis of insights and trends on risk issues, and also providing a platform for engaging in stakeholder dialogue on specific topics relevant to them. So that's one of the scenarios for the Council. On the top right-hand side, the EU Advisory Committee. And so this is much more a recommending organization. So it may recommend on a whole range of things, from essentially requirements around practice, from ways of doing risk assessment, from perhaps even including things like assessment of limit values, for example. But the focus there is on providing advice to policymakers, and regulators. Again, with a staff of experts and direct funding from the Commission. On the bottom left-hand side, we have the Centre. So this is a non-governmental organisation. It's really focused on the whole group of stakeholders that we see in the in Marie-Valentin's earlier slide. The funding modalities for this are different. There may be some direct core funding from EC and member states, but also additional funding through research activities and commissioned research. A very strong emphasis on this on an online portal with access to information on nanorisk issues, to results and on information sharing, and a real platform for stimulating debate and engaging in dialogues of societal relevance to stakeholders. And finally, the roundtable. This is a completely non-governmental organization, essentially set up by stakeholders, may have a membership basis, and funding may come through that, and there can be additional private and public funding through various activities, including research. A focus here will be the online portal, but also a platform for stimulating debate, a platform for forming and advocating positions, and a platform for forming and implementing plans. So through these 4 scenarios, these are, as I say, 4 possible ways that we could build the Council. And what we're engaged in this point really is further activity, further stakeholder activity, further activity across the 3 projects to essentially establish what are the pros and cons of these different scenarios. What are essentially the main arguments for and against the scenarios and for the services within them. And we have a multi-level activity going on at the moment, including this and some of the input that we collected already from Marie-Valentin's session. We have high-level interviews planned for senior executives in in organizations like ECA and ECFIA. We have further stakeholder workshops and a range of activities that are going to help us ultimately build this blueprint of what the NRGC looks like, and essentially what we call defining the building blocks of the council. So the activity has been quite unique in my view, particularly given that we have worked so closely through the 3 projects to do it. It has been quite an intense activity to get to this point. It's also been an activity where we are essentially having to continually move forward and make progress. And what we're now seeing in this slide here is how you can get involved in the future. And so this link, which we will send out afterwards, is a way for you to join the stakeholder community of the 3 projects, inviting you to sign up and then participate going forward in the further developments of the council and indeed other aspects of the project as well. So thank you very much. I hope that's been useful just to give you a little bit of a sense of what we're going on. I do encourage you to join that stakeholder community and be part of the process to design these councils. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob, and thank you very much, Marie-Valentin. And for all the attendees, you would see on the banner on the top the link to the stakeholder community where you can join and you can sign up there. As next speaker, I would like to announce Ineke Malsh to show RiskGone's tool on ethics.
Yes. I hope it will work. Yeah, so good afternoon, everybody. I would like to give you a feel of one of the tools we are developing in the project RiskGone, where I am one of the partners, to screen ethical issues of nanotechnology. Next slide, please. So in the presentation, I would like to build on the presentations on the Risk Governance Council, which were made just now by Marie-Valentin and Rob, and then sort of discuss what this council could do by addressing ethical issues of nanomaterials. And then I will also demonstrate the use of a screening tool we are developing in RiskGone to address the ethical impacts of nanomaterials. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is a screenshot of the tool, and basically this is a sort of structured questionnaire to self-assess whether or not there are any ethical issues related to a nanomaterial and the nanoproduct you are developing, or the Risk Governance Council will have to assess in their work. I would like to now go to the share screen. Open browser. Go to.
Ineke, we do not see yet your screen. Yes, looks like.
Can you see it now?
Not yet. It's still loading, but now I guess we can. Yes, we are at the screening tool.
Yeah, so it is at the in the cloud of Nova Mechanics, one of the partners in the RiskGone project. And basically, it is sort of following the same approach as the European Commission is following in assessing ethics of projects proposed under Horizon 2020. So the first question asks whether nanomaterials are used in a healthcare context, or may there be any ethically sensitive impacts on public health and safety. And then you can first say yes or no. And if you say yes, for instance, it is a nanomaterial used in pharmaceuticals, then you have to self-assess whether you expect any ethical issues and how severe you expect these ethical issues to be. So it goes from a 1 to 5 scale. So the first, if you think it's not really very important, then you can say, or if it's very unlikely that there are any ethical issues, you can say 1. And then if you really expect some very severe concerns, for instance, impacts on patients' health or on the wider society, then you can say 5. And if you think it's something in between, you can say. At this stage, it is a screening tool, so it's sort of meant to give you a best estimate at this point. Then the second one goes into privacy issues. For instance, if you have diagnostics, or if you have any sensor technologies where you use nanomaterials. Also, public liberties, civil rights and liberties, social justice and equality, common good. So later on, you can access the link yourself and play with the tool to get a better feel. In the last column on the right of the screen, there is some explanation of what is meant by each question. So now we can go back to the presentation. Yeah. Okay, next slide, please. And then we also, this is even more experimental, because some people say, yeah, but we should not only look at ethics as a risk, but also nanotechnology can also be beneficial to ethical issues, because it can improve, you can have a product with nanotechnology which is ethically seen better than an existing product. So that's why we are starting to think about how to use it to assess risks as well as benefits, but this is very experimental. If you look at this link, you can also play with that tool, and I will be happy if you can play with it and send me some comments on how to improve the tool, because we're still developing it further in RiskGone. Next, please. Yeah, so to sort of make it more concrete, I made a self-assessment on 3 case studies which are actually already analyzed from an ethical perspective in the literature. So the first is on nanopharmacy, and that's based on a publication by Job Timmermans, Yingwan Zhao, and Jeroen van den Hoven on value-sensitive design of new drugs from 2011 already, so it's a bit old, but basically they sort of make an analysis of ethical issues raised by using nanotechnology in pharmaceuticals, and they expect rather they expect health related issues, sort of on a moderate scale, privacy issues depending on the application in pharmaceuticals. So if you just use it in drug delivery, there will not be real privacy issues. But if you, for instance, use it in diagnostics, there may be privacy issues. Then they don't expect or they don't mention impacts on civil liberties of people. So freedom is not really affected, but equality may be affected if poor people have less access to pharmaceuticals with nanotechnologies. The common good, it's also not really a negative impact. The environment may be affected, and also sustainable. It may have effect on sustainable development. And with this sustainability in the tool, we use the definition of the SDGs, so the Sustainable Development Goals by the United Nations, which goes from poverty to health, through environment, and quite a broad range of issues. In this publication, they also didn't see military dual use potential or misuse. And so if you just look at the ethical risks, then you can sort of calculate what kind of an ethical impact assessment you need after the screening stage. So this is what the tool can be used for. And since in this case 5 ethical issues are identified and 1 with a 4, so that's a rather high impact which is expected. So you would have to do a very large-scale ethical impact assessment to really go into the depth of what kind of ethical issues are expected, who may be affected, what do the different stakeholders think about it, and so on. And then if you also use the risk-benefit tool on this case, then you can see that it doesn't only give a risk for health, but even stronger potential health benefits, which is not so surprising since it's a pharmaceutical where you want to use it. And also some benefits on the common good, because if you can improve the health, public health, then that will bring more benefit to everybody in the world. And also some potential benefits in sustainability, mainly the Sustainable Development Goals, which are related to health in this case. Next slide, please. So you can use the tool to do a similar self-assessment on another case study, which I also found in literature, where they assessed nanovaccines in fish farming. And that's based on a presentation by Mir and Miska, which is called Precaution or Integrated Responsibility Approach to Nanovaccines in Fish Farming, a critical appraisal of the UNESCO precautionary principle. So the link to the publication is on the slide. And if you look at how they discuss the potential ethical issues, they again see potential risk for health, for human health, and also for the environment and sustainability. Because of course these vaccines, if you use it, for instance, in salmon farmed in closed containers, but with where ocean water can go in and out. So there may be environmental impacts and also impacts on sustainable development. But at the same time, they see some potential health risks because eating fish is, of course, healthy, and sustainability can also benefit. So they are a bit more uncertain. That's why they also refer to the precautionary principle. You see that there are 3 ethical risks identified, and 2 are medium. The one is moderate. So then you need a less extensive ethical impact assessment, which is then a medium scale ethical impact assessment. Next, please. So the third is maybe more familiar to you. That's nano-titanium dioxide in sunscreens. It's much discussed. And in 2010, some ethicists also looked at discussion from an ethical perspective. So they saw some concerns for health of using titanium dioxide in sunscreens and cosmetics. Also liberties, which was mainly related to the discussion about labeling products with whether or not you should include nano on the label of these cosmetics. And then there are some environmental and sustainability concerns, moderate. So this would result in a small-scale EIA because there are 4 issues which could be affected, but they're not really very severe. So you won't need a very extensive ethical impact assessment of this topic. And then, of course, there are also potential benefits, because if you can use the cosmetics, the sunscreens, you don't get sunburn, and also there may be some benefits for sustainable development. Yeah, next, please. Yeah, I think this is what I wanted to say, and I think I also took my period because time is up. But if you have any comments or questions, I would like to hear them.
Ineke, there were a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah.
One, for example, for Claire Mays, are these adapted from typical tools used in many areas, or an original approach authored by RiskGone? Regarding the tool, I guess.
Well, I didn't quite hear you. So, which question is it?
There is a question in the chat from Claire Mays. Are these adapted from typical tools used in many areas, or an original approach authored by RiskGone?
So the tool can be used. The tool builds on earlier work in another project, Satori, where they developed this ethical impact assessment procedure for very different fields. So they also used it on a case study of nanotechnology, but also on other emerging technologies. So basically, the procedure of looking in a structured way to the ethical issues of an emerging technology, you can do that also in other fields. So it's not really nano-specific. But basically in RiskGone, we wanted to do a multi-criteria decision analysis of safety and sustainability of nanotechnology, but then also take into account ethical issues. So that's why I sort of tried to look at this tool which had been developed before and try to see how useful it can be in a broader assessment of nanomaterials in the risk governance of nanomaterials project. Is that? Let me see.
Well, thanks a lot, Ineke, again for presenting the tool. The tools, both links have been put into the chat by Andreas, Novo Mechanics. So please access them, play around with them, as Ineke said, give her some feedback. I also put her email address into the chat. I'll just scroll up a bit. And we would then like to proceed with our program. So I announce the next talker, who is Arto Säämänen, from the NanoRigo project, to give some insight into the NanoRisk Governance Framework, which is of course underlying the work of the Council, which can do take this responsibility, as Marie-Valentin and Rob have elaborated on earlier. So Arto, please start.
Thank you, Martin. My name is Arto Säämänen, and I'm working in the Finnish Institute of Occupational Health, and I'm a partner in the NanoRigo project. And in this presentation, I will show you briefly what kind of thoughts we have in NanoRigo project about the risk governance framework. Here is my pencil. Okay, first of all, I'd like you to think about what does nanotechnology risk governance mean to you. Hopefully, we have a poll in this system. If not, please put them to the chat. The ideas. perhaps we don't have the poll in here, so we can continue about what we mean about risk governance and risk governance framework. Is here in this slide, shown this slide. Governance is the refers to the actions, processes, traditions, and institutions by which the authority is exercised, and decisions are taken and implemented. And the framework for risk governance is based on the defined and structured process to address risks in a comprehensive and holistic manner. And in this process, we need to involve multidisciplinary sciences and multi-stakeholder approaches. So that's what we think that the framework should be. And so what we need in this framework? First of all, we need to integrate important concepts and principles and tools. We need an access to the data and guidance how to obtain high quality data. We need to access to the tools for risk assessment, risk management, concern assessment, and so on. We need to provide responsible and transparent communication between stakeholders, and we also support to identify future research needs and to be able to predict what is coming in the future. The risk governance framework in NanoRigo project is based on the International Risk Governance Center's general risk governance framework. And in NanoRigo project, we are making an adaptation of that to the nanotechnology field. We have defined steps, 6 steps in the process, and for each step we have defined what they should be included in these steps. In the framework, the first we define the process, what must be done. It is the series of steps. Then we have defined core functions, which is cross-cutting issues to all these steps, which includes, for example, communication, stakeholder involvement, context and culture, and also the coordination of the whole process. And the final thing in our framework is that for each step we have defined concepts, which is the principles for nanotechnology risk governance work. We will collect the tools and the data guidances to this framework, and also we make an illustrations for each steps. It is based on the case studies, and then it will explain how this give more examples how this step will be working on. The idea is that we integrate the key elements of the governance into the framework. In this slide, we have an example for possible integration of societal considerations to the risk governance framework. We have explored a lot of possible tools and then try to find out where in the framework they fit in the most in the best way. Okay, this was very short presentation about the framework ideas what we have in this NanoRigo project. This is a joint cooperation with all three NMPP 13 projects. Each two other projects have a little bit different views at the moment for the framework, but the basic idea is to utilize the International Risk Governance Council's the general framework. But we are working together to get and aiming for one framework together for all three projects. Okay, this was my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I guess
thank you, Arto. There have been a few questions in the chat.
Okay.
Or you were actually questioning the audience, what they would expect. So, for example, there is one suggestion by Massimo Peruccia to allow companies safely develop nano-enabled products based on their previous risk assessments done. Or to have regulators work together with innovators.
Okay, yeah, good suggestions. Yeah, and also Ineke, participatory. Yes, of course, it's a participatory and evidence-based decision making is really important for risk governance, and in the aim of our approach is that we involve the stakeholders and make the participatory approach to the risk governance as the best possible way.
Arto, you also mentioned societal effects and the societal interaction, and of course this is an issue where Martin Mullins is going to really also look into a lot, because in the end risk is something, an estimation and assessment that the whole society needs to go for. So we are very happy now that Martin is going to give us some insight into, for example, other stakeholders, like for example insurances, are thinking about how such a framework could run, how this could serve a council in the end, how such interactions with the other societal stakeholders may be done. Please, Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Thanks for the intro, and nice to see familiar faces and hear Ineke and Arto speak to these issues. So so I'm going to be talking about contestation and insurance and risk governance in the context of NMP 13, and in particular in the context of NanoRigo. So why contestation? So essentially, we're building on a previous piece of work which looked at absence of data and looked at it from the perspective of a kind of automated triggering of the precautionary principle, and we had some sort of critical analysis of that. And in this instance, contestation is key, because I think the first thing to think about is insurance is an outsider from our world, from the world of the techno-scientific, if you like. And what the insurance people perceive as they look into this world is a noisy field, is a field where data protocols are a bit shaky and not entirely clear. They also see a contested world where different scientific groups or different scientists perceive risks differently. And for insurance, they need clarity. So I think let's just zoom out for a second. There's two types of key stakeholders to consider here. There's the primary insurers, brokers, underwriters. What these people typically do is they take decisions quite quickly. So they need quite simple data sets, something like control banding, decision trees, These are the types of approaches that they need. And then we have a second group of insurance-related stakeholders, the reinsurance industry. And the more I think about this over the last year or so, 18 months in NanoRigo, I think when we look at the governance framework, I think we should possibly focus on the reinsurance sector, because it's the reinsurance sector that lends discipline, if you like, to the overall insurance market. So if you like, the reinsurance sector is the university, the think tank of the wider insurance industry. And I think they would be a valuable addition to any type of, be it intergovernmental, advisory, roundtable, center of risk. And I think, I'll get onto my slides in a minute, but I think I just want to get some of these thoughts out here. I think overall, amongst the three projects as well, like there is a paradox here. So from my own perspective, say in this instance, the perspective of insurance stakeholder, are we looking at the idea of epistemic authority? Is that something that the council is trying to achieve? Or are we looking more to try and capture different voices? So insurance is a bit of a hybrid in terms of the stakeholder, because it sits across, and Martin, you mentioned that, the wider social aspect of this. Insurance essentially sits across a number of these, if you like, extant discourses. So we have the techno-scientific in the insurance industry. There are chief scientific officers, highly qualified risk engineers. Then we have, if you like, a more business-orientated logic. So the underwriters are very anxious to get in business. That's the, if you like, that's the drive of the organization as a whole. We also have the presence of official logics in insurance. I think this is also interesting when we consider governance initiatives like NMP 13. So in this case, what we're looking at is, so the financial industry is a very heavily regulated industry, more so I would suggest than the chemical industry. So these regulators actually want to see the way insurance calculate risk. They want to see whether or not there's long tail risk in the system. And nanotechnology is, if you like, potentially it's the perfect type of long tail risk. And of course, all these people who work in insurance they exist in society, so they're exposed to activist discourse in the social media. And I don't think we should discount science fiction either, because nanotechnology does crop up in that, and this tends to shape people's views of this technology. So I'll just flip on to my next slide here. Yeah, so overall, what we see in the insurance industry is a decline of interest towards nanomaterials, and that is largely due to the fact that there hasn't been too many cases over the last 10 years. And so if you go back to circa 2008, 2009, there was a lot of discussion in the insurance industry about potential exclusions, about a great deal of worry about the long tail, and this idea, shadow of asbestosis was hanging over the insurability of nanomaterials. Since then, like I say, a decline of interest. It used to be in the top 3 if you look at the Lloyd's list. Now I think it occasionally gets into the top 10. What we've also seen, and I think this is also interesting from the NMP 13 set of outputs, is there's less interest in terms of formal tools, because essentially the insurance industry is actually quite skeptical of formal tools around this. So more holistic approaches are used, eliciting expert opinion, trying to find a general understanding of the field. On the, like I say, on the paradoxical side, there are regulatory demands whereby you show you're working. So that's important too. The last point there speaks to my idea of contestation, because one of the risks we need to separate types of risk here. So there's the absolute scientific risks involved in nanomaterial processes, but there's also, from the insurance perspective, there's also the risk of contestation in and of itself is a risk, because one of the important lines of business in insurance around nanotechnology is insuring against legal risk. And where there is contestation, you're looking at multi-million-dollar lawsuits, you're looking at extended litigation, and this, to the insurance industry, is a concern, and it is a concern across a whole range of activities, not just in nanomaterials. So the more contestation you have, the more unease, or the more potential for contestation you have, the more unease there is in the insurance industry. Recently, I spoke to a third provider of data to insurance. Again, interesting for an NMP. I think Rob spoke of providing services. So one of the services this group provide, I won't name them today because I said I wouldn't, is essentially they scan the literature, the scientific literature around nanomaterials, nanoprocesses, and they afford it a score from 0 to 1 according to how much agreement or disagreement there is in the field. So that's an interesting element in terms of the types of, if you like, competition there is out there, and also in terms of what type of thing the insurance is interested in. So it's not just the science per se. Insurance are also interested in the scientists. I would add to this as well. Insurers are not only interested in the science per se, but if you think about insurance, their unit of analysis, what they're looking at primarily is they're looking at the firms involved in the field. So they need knowledge on the nature of those firms, the type of training regime that exists in these firms. Going back to what Ineke was saying earlier on, the types of culture, the types of, if you like, duty of care processes that exist in these firms. So I think in a lot of the conversations that I've been involved with, the actual entities where decisions are made are quite absent from our conversation. And if you compare this to what happens in financial regulation, it's really quite different. And I think we could learn something from financial regulation in this regard. In central banks across Europe, what is really the focus of attention is the nature of culture in the regulated entities. And I think in this space, we need more attention to the nature of that industry, the types of people that work in it, the types of pressure, the types of bonus schemes, the economics and so forth that exist within these companies. Quick question for you, Martin. I'm looking at my time here, 48. When am I due to finish? I'll carry on. So I see a question. So what are the impacts of other stakeholders? So I suppose the impact is that if you can imagine a risk engineer under pressure may have to jump, this is a question from Claire Mays, may have to jump from one field, maybe looking at the oil industry in the morning, the food industry at lunchtime, and the nanotechnology section in the afternoon. So I think this is one of the things that the NMP outputs could really serve. It's quite difficult to get good information, clear information, non-noisy information quite quickly. So I think if that's that answers your question. And are these directly measured today or just anticipated? So there is some attempt at measure, there is some attempt at control banding, but there are few attempts in terms of actually affording precise numbers to the types of risk. As far as I can see, there's been a move away from that type of formal approach to measuring risk. So I hope that answers your question, Claire. Can I go back to my presentation, Martin? All I'm seeing now is the comments. Okay, so next slide. Oh yeah, so this is an example of I just point to the third paragraph there. This is a blog, an insurance blog, and essentially what you see in the third paragraph down is this idea of this perception in the insurance industry that, say, in the field of toxicology and how it relates to the environment, that this field or that these phenomena are still relatively poorly understood. So that's the overall impression of insurers in this regard. So next slide. So again, this is from the Guardian relatively recently. So I'm gonna flick through a few of these slides now, just to next one. So this is from the article. Oh, go back one. Yeah. So just an example of the type of contestation that exists in the media. And as I say, insurance professionals kind of transverse a lot of the fields that we're looking at. Some of them are scientists, some of them are not scientists, but these are the types of things they get exposed to. So from this particular scientist at Duke University, I wash my hands like crazy, to a more, if you like, benign interpretation. And also recently the titanium dioxide, that was quite a lively debate across different mediums. So this is what insurance people see. And if we want to help them, well, first of all, they can help us because they can lend a degree of precision and a different type of logic to our activities within NMP 13, within a framework, within a governance council. But I also think, as a community, we need to think about communication. I think communication is key. Risk communication is key, and how to make so we need to be inclusive, but paradoxically, we need to be less noisy for this particular stakeholder. So I'm going to stop there.